Biegen. In 2007, there was a notice in my local newspaper that the Housing Authority was having this application process for something called Section 8 vouchers. There would be a waiting list. So I cut it out of the newspaper, and I kept it trying to figure out what it was, because I had no idea. I had just gotten divorced after 18 years of marriage. I have 3 kids who at the time were 5, 9, and 13. I hadn't worked in over 15 years. I had just gotten a part-time job, which was only 25 hours a week. I was told it would not become more than that. That was my only income. My ex decided that he didn't want to pay the court-agreed child support, and then he left the country to go back to his home country. I was really concerned knowing that I would be unable to pay the rent. I'd have, I could pay some of it, but definitely not all of it. So I took that little piece of paper and I sent in an application. This was in October 2007. Again, I had no idea what this was or what it would do to help me, but I figured, you never know, something could come up of it. So between 2007, when I applied, and 2014, when I was granted a housing choice voucher, my 3 young children and I were evicted from our home, and we moved into a friend's basement. There were no homelessness prevention programs that returned my very desperate phone calls. There was no one that I asked, and I asked a lot of people, where can I go for help? What can I do? Who do I call? I had no idea, and it was very terrifying. Between 2007 and 2014, my part-time job became a full-time job until the company downsized and I was let go. I returned to college to get my associate's degree while receiving unemployment and financial aid. From my associate's degree, I went to get a bachelor's degree. At that time, I had 2 part-time jobs, full-time school hours, 3 children in grammar school, high school. We were receiving SNAP and Medicaid. We still had no child support. Child support is not anything that I had ever been able to rely on. My children, living in someone else's basement, were diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and they came to me independently with suicidal ideations. This was a horrifying thing. Thank God for Medicaid, but you don't ever want your child to come to you and say, Mom, I don't want to live anymore. So, we had to address that. Mom had to address that while working 2 full-time jobs, while going to school full-time. My son also had recurring upper respiratory infections due to our living situation. Between 2007 and 2014, I continually wrote letters to the Housing Authority of Bergen County, reminding them of my need, my living situation, and my address, just in case they decided to send me something and say, "Ooh, you got it." Didn't want them to send it to the wrong place. In 2014, HUD released funding into the Housing Choice Voucher Program. When I read that letter from the Housing Authority, I sat in my car and I wept. But I didn't realize how hard it was going to be from there. Once one receives the voucher, it is not the end of the struggle. There are limits to the amount of rent you can afford. There are limits to the amount of time needed to find housing. There are limits to the areas where you can look. And then you also keep in mind, I want my kids to stay in the same school because they've had so much trauma to this point. I don't want to pick up and move from one side of the county to the other. There's also the stigma that landlords make as to what type of family you are, that you need to have a housing voucher. I was able to find an apartment for myself and my 3 children who at this time were 11, 15, and 19. Those are pretty important years of a kid's life that we were unable to be in a comfortable home that only belonged to us. But it was not without difficulty in finding the apartment. Landlords don't return phone calls. They refuse to accept the voucher. They find other reasons for denial. Your credit is too bad. We don't have enough room. You name it, I'm sure you've all heard it. In my town, there is an abundance of new housing construction. None of it appears to be affordable. The very few affordable units that I have run into have restrictions, such as you must be a senior, you must be disabled, you must make so much income, which a lot of people will be $5 over, and you no longer qualify for that. Affordable housing is a right. Too many families spend at least 50% of their income toward rent, including those with disabilities. I am still coping with the repercussions of homelessness, even after being housed for 5 years. I am now employed full-time with a nonprofit agency, helping families and singles coming out of shelter with mental illness diagnoses. That doesn't make it any easier helping them find housing. But when I tell my clients, I get it. I know how hard this is. They look at me like I'm crazy, like, what does she know? She knows nothing about this, but I lived the struggle. I'm still living it. I'm still struggling to pay even my Section 8 rent. And I'm not going to say that to them, but I really do get it. No one should have to wait 7 or more years for an affordable housing opportunity. Housing is a right. Housing is healthcare. This funding is so valuable to these vulnerable families, including mine. Thank you.